Ava, can you take me off?
Hello, everyone. Ook, what were you saying?
I'm in a shitload of pain at the moment. The back's been playing up all week, and so you can take me off stage because I'm really not civil to talk to anyone, but I really wanted to listen to Joe because I like him. So yeah, someone else can come up on stage. That's
All right.
Not...
If Steve comes on, I'll put you back down and then bring Steve up.
Yeah, easy.
All right. Mate. Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the post-Valentine's Day live stream. To start off, we have a special guest. As per the description, we have Joe Campbell, who I've met on Twitter, and we had had some exchanges, and I had brought him on. I think, did I bring you on at least 2 times, right? You were here 2 other times? Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So he's becoming a recurrent guest for us, for which I thank him very much. And of course, I have our usual suspects on the stage with me. John Clark, Neo, Ook, and Blarg. And Ook is just going to be in listening mode because, unfortunately, it seems like he's in a bit of pain. Hey, guys.
Howdy.
How is everyone? Hey, and by the way, hello to Tilting and Sideboob, and of course, Miranda. And we also have your average deist. I'm sure he's better than the average deist, but... the average deist. How's everyone doing?
Not bad.
Did you guys do anything for Valentine's Day?
So my partner is really into knitting and sometimes has sleep issues. So I found light up knitting needles.
What?
I'm not kidding. It's they have little like watch batteries in them. You can also get the kind that can charge up. And if it's late at night and you don't want to have the lights on and bothering a bunch of people, you can knit in the dark with your light up knitting needles.
Wow.
I know, it's bonkers.
How about you, Joe? Did you do anything?
Watched a movie, and my wife made a nice dinner. My wife Cindy, and we watched this old movie, 1983, Local Hero.
Local Hero? No.
Very interesting. Kind of a little romantic. Although the ending is not all that great, but it's kind of interesting because there's a company goes to, I think it's an oil company, goes to Scotland to buy this town to make this big, part of their company, and but the town kind of goes along with it.
Is that the one with Sean Connery?
No, it's got Burt Lancaster.
It's the older Burt. Yep.
Yeah. And he plays the owner, but it's got some great scenes of Scotland, I guess, which is what's really kind of nice about it. And it's just this sort of quirky story. It was pretty good comedy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just wasn't able to recover this week because no one got me anything for the Gulf of America Day.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
I was very disappointed. Hopefully, but the good thing is I think we have almost like 350 some shopping days before the next Gulf of America Day. So, you guys, if anyone's like thinking of getting me anything, just hint.
What about I get you a penguin and soak it in some crude oil and post that over? That seems appropriate.
Yeah, that would definitely make some MAGA happy, I think. Anyway.
My understanding is they're really absorbent.
Oh.
Good grief.
Are you calling it Gulf of America so you can go to the Trump press conferences?
That's right.
Yes.
I have to refresh my style sheet for my live streams, where Gulf of Mexico is no longer referred to as Gulf of Mexico.
And get ready. Also, get ready to swap in red, blue, and
Oh, that's right.
what's it?
Red, white, and blue land.
Red,
Yes.
white, and blue land.
Oh, that's mental.
Ah.
What?
And what are they
I
going to
mean,
call the Gaza Strip when it becomes a resort?
Yeah.
It's the East Riviera, I think, or is
yeah,
it the
that's
Middle
that
East
posh.
Riviera?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things that you think is some kind of like satire, some parody that's going on, right? Red, white, and Greenland. I mean, they actually submitted that as a bill. I mean,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just
What type of stupid do you have to be? Actually, in the comments just before, there was some discussion about bringing back straws, plastic straws, and unfortunately, YouTube wouldn't let me. And you know how it kills turtles, and YouTube wouldn't let me post the comment saying if they're too stupid not to eat straws, they deserve extinction. I don't know.
oh boy.
Apparently, that's the theory I think that MAGA works on.
I mean, considering that some of those people can't seem to manage paper straws, I don't think they should say anything about turtles.
Like some paper straws are demonstrably terrible. There's no doubt
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got them in Australia, but they get better. You're like, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
the early ones were just awful, but the ones I'm getting now that I get these days are actually surprisingly good.
Yeah. I mean, what they really should do is, they can kind of coat the paper part of the straw, maybe put some plastic coating on it, and maybe like make the paper as thin as possible.
Yeah,
and then
just keep
that should
working on that. Oh, that's how Tetra Paks work. You need
what is that?
bit of foil as
yeah.
well. You know those like the little juice boxes. They're plastic on the outside, layer of paper, layer of foil, layer of plastic. That makes those Tetra Paks, and they're pretty close to unrecyclable.
Oh, yeah, I can
They come
imagine.
with plastic straws. Don't they? They have to have a little straw too, in addition to.
Oh yes, they definitely do. Those are just a good size for getting. Oh, they're too small for whale blowholes. I think that's what golf balls are for.
Yes, according to Seinfeld, that's true.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, before I start, I wanted to share a couple of the comments from YouTube. I haven't been as active on Twitter as before, so I don't have too many of the Dodger of the Week. I mean, there have been some, it just hasn't been very notable. It's been the usual crowd. But there were a couple of comment threads that I thought was kind of funny, so I wanted to share that before we get into our regular discussion, the main discussion. So where is that? Okay, here we go. All right, so I had posted an excerpt from our last live stream talking about Ben Shapiro's argument. And this guy, I mean, this first time I ran into him, he made this comment that you guys sound insufferable and biased as hell. I didn't really go back and listen to, that segment, but I'm not sure where it's coming from. But, he doesn't say anything like to back up what he meant by biased. I have no idea. And he's not a theist. He's not a Christian. So I was kind of trolling him back and forth, saying, kind of continue to repeat his kind of empty claims with no backing. Oh, thanks for giving your insufferable biased as hell opinion. And so there's back and forth on that. And when I looked at his profile, he seemed like, kind of a young kid. So I made a comment that he's probably he was saying that it's almost like he was doing sort of a, what's it, social justice warrior. Oh, yeah. He says, sorry, can't help it when I see someone thinking they're better than someone else because they think their philosophy is better and they're so much smarter. So it's almost like he just thought it was unjust. We were being unjust to Ben Shapiro for criticizing his argument. So when I looked up his profile, he's some kid. So I kind of made a joke, he's probably just some kid who just read The Catcher in the Rye, thinks that he knows what it's all about. I just kind of remember that phase, when I was in high school and read Catcher in the Rye, and I thought it was so cool. So anyway, I thought that was just kind of funny going back and forth. And this guy was like saying, kind of being sarcastic, they're better than Shapiro. And a lot of these guys just don't seem to understand, at least I am, attacking the argument. And when I tack on kind of insults, that's not meant to detract from the quality of their argument, because I think the bad quality of their argument stands for itself. The other one was, some of you may have seen this. Oh, sorry, I need to switch the tab. Did you guys see this comment from Libby? There are many things that Jesus would never do, and if our desire is to follow him, there. So she kind of goes on her usual thing. So as soon as I saw this
one, yeah, I saw the list, and she didn't get it. I got it instantly.
Yeah. So as soon as I saw that,
didn't want to bury the lead. That was good.
Yeah. So as soon as she posted that,
I saw this. I didn't see the first part.
and so obviously, for I'm sure most of you get it. This is basically the Rickroll.
Yeah.
Where
it's old school trolling.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should just bring it up. Okay, here it is. So this is the Rickrolling. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, this is the part. So he says, so that's basically the list of things that Jesus would never do to you. He's never going to give you up, never going to let you down. So this is the first time I had a chance to do this, like on, for Jesus, just because of setup. And the funnier thing is, of course, that she doesn't get it. Which have you believed that he has done to you?
Oh, hashtag
I can't believe. Yeah, I can't believe she was actually like serious. That, I mean, even if she didn't know the song, like this part where it says like, say goodbye or make you cry, say goodbye till a lion hurt you. It's like, I don't know. It was a bit of a reach. But anyway, I thought that was very amusing.
yes.
All right. So now we're serious. So the main topic for today is that, let me get this ready, is to discuss objective and subjective morality. And the reason I wanted to discuss this is that, and I think Joe wouldn't be aware of this as much, but in the YouTube comments in the Atheist Experience channel, a lot of theists, apologists, would bring up the moral proof of God, that basically God exists because we have morality. And the worst thing is, and I think I lost the window I had. Shoot, so I was having so much fun with the Rickroll thing that I think I lost my place here. But the real problem is that the Christians would say that basically they're the only ones who have morality, and that no one else, and that's including atheists and presumably other people, just are not moral at all. They don't have morality at all, and so that's where I wanted to kind of discuss objective and subjective morality, and we can kind of discuss it in terms of the argument and kind of expand on it, because the issue is that when these guys put these things up, they don't actually make an argument. They'll just like make these claims and they won't do anything to really back it up. So that's where I wanted to actually go through it in detail and kind of see where it takes us. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I had pulled up like an example, a recent example from Jim Edith on the thing that he always posts.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
that we
That's
can-
the weirdest argument out of him, eh? Like he's not arguing for objective morality, but he argues for nothing but objective morality.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Well, because he's saying that there is no morality unless it's subjective morality.
Objective morals and duties.
Yeah.
Objective.
Has anybody ever gotten from him what he means by objective moral duties?
The other
And
kind of
values.
confusing
No.
thing is
No.
when you try to say or say that, because I tried to argue with him that he doesn't have objective morality because he's divine command theory is just subjectivism, but then he would say, well, I'm not really arguing for objective morality, which I can't
Yeah,
figure
he's not
out what
arguing
he's
for
really trying
objective
to say.
morality. He's just arguing for objective morality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to hear from him to try to see if he can explain that, but I'm just afraid that even if I got him on here, he's not going to be able to coherently explain what he means. I kind of get a sense
it's the same
of what.
thing for years. He's that's how you can spot his alt characters. It's this objective moral values and duties comment, and you just go back through the emails and pull them up, and you can just pick up every single one of his alts. It's bizarre.
Well, I think he's coming from like basically a presup argument that he just doesn't know. He doesn't know how to articulate the precept argument, but he's basically saying that the existence of God is what instantiates all possible moral views. I think that's where he's trying to get to.
See, I'm not even convinced of that, because that's what he's trying to get to. His argument pattern is one of somebody who has been deeply brainwashed by a cult, or an authoritarian intellectual figure. So even if he's not in a cult, he has a cult-like devotion to an authority figure, and those are the ones and they're like giving him these little one-liners, and he either is unwilling or unable to think beyond these talking points. And he clearly has shown no ability to have any real critical thinking beyond that, because his arguments never really go one or two steps before he just calls people liars and all the other just toxic things that he spews out, and then comes back the next day and does it all over again.
Yeah, so let me. I did find one. This isn't the one I was thinking of, the one I had ready, but I think just to kind of help Joe kind of figure out where this is coming from.
Yeah, and
So this is-
Miranda's point there too.
Yeah.
Right.
So ultimately, what he's saying is that atheism doesn't have morality, and the weird thing is that he's saying because it doesn't have objective morality, that it basically excuses every immoral action possible. Right.
Which isn't how morality works.
Right.
Right. But then when you ask him, do you need a God to tell you not to steal and kill and murder? He's like, well, no, I'm not saying that you need a God to do that, but you need a God to have objective morality. It's like,
Yeah.
well, which is it?
Well, as Forrest put it the other day, he murders and rapes exactly as many people as he feels that he wants to every single day.
Yeah.
It just happens that number is zero,
Zero.
always. Yeah.
I tried asking him once what he thinks enlightened self-interest means, and he's clearly never heard the term. And he just goes right back to "you're lying to suggest that," and just spun his wheels.
Yeah, this is kind of hard to read, but actually, let me try this. Okay. So he's saying that God is necessary for moral right and wrong to exist in reality. Therefore, atheism is morally depraved, like we were saying, because we're unable to justify any objective moral values and duties to be right or wrong about. So again, he kind of falls into this fallacy of thinking that if it's not an objective moral value, then it can't be considered right or wrong. And I think that'll kind of lead us into this discussion of, what the definitions of those things are. But let me just finish the other thing. So he brings this up. Yeah, go ahead.
There is a kind of ambiguity when people use the term. I think personally, objective and subjective are just not good terms when it comes to morality, because it's a little bit of both. But somebody raised before, well, if you don't know what objective morality is, you're an idiot. Somebody made this comment.
Yeah, that's
as we were talking.
Yeah, from Miranda.
And now there, it's, well, if you don't know slavery is wrong, then maybe there is something wrong with you. You're deprived or something. But the idea that, then the question is, though, what is it that could make, what is it to make something objective, like a truth maker kind of objectivity, when it comes to morality? They're just, that's where it just seems a little wrong. Clearly it can't be like a matter of fact, right? I mean,
what do you mean? What can't be?
Feeling, but where's the wrongness? So it's hard to see what would do the job for objective, and it is a little irritating when people just bring in God as like he could do anything. If I were to make something moral, that's not objective, that's subjective. But if God makes it moral, then it's suddenly objective. There's no explanation there about what makes it objective, other than it's sort of done by God. But
there is that.
The secularists could just say the same thing.
Yep.
I just think what makes it objective, well, there are these moral propositions. They exist, and there you have it, right? I mean, it's not like it's a worse explanation. They're both bad.
Joe, the usual argument I see to cover that is that it's objective because it's God's, how's it phrased? It's God's moral nature. And that's why. And then you just go, okay, well, does that then mean that morality exists separate to God? And that kind of upsets them as well, because go, oh no, it doesn't. It's not separate to God, but it's part of God. But the logic just breaks apart into pieces when they attempt to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the horns of the youthful dilemma that I haven't seen any of these guys really address. But now that we've kind of gotten Joe up to speed on some of the ridiculous things that these guys say, as kind of both proof for God and also to, argue against atheism, right? It's like you can't have coherent morality without any good or evil in reality. How can anyone be morally right or wrong if no objective moral truths exist to be right and wrong about? So before we move on, then let's just kind of discuss a little bit of the definition. So let me just start off with Joe. When we talk about objective morality and subjective morality, I think the subjective part is pretty easy to understand. But what would you consider to be objective morality?
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to think of an answer to that question. Yeah, I just I mean, I guess I know. I beyond just saying that it's wrong. I don't know what adding the objectively wrong part kind of does to it. And I think it's very hard to give an explanation of what would make it wrong if you're not going to appeal to anything kind of subjective. I mean, for me, what makes something wrong has to do with, a sort of unjustified action against the will of another. But it's not as if you could articulate that in a way that's going to not refer to anything subjective. You're talking about somebody else's violating somebody else's will. You're already in the subjective kind of territory.
Well, I think and let me then open up to the other guys here.
Yeah, right. Maybe they have better.
Yeah, what do you guys think of what objective morality means?
Well, there's the example that Matt Dillahunty gives, which I think is quite a good one, and he gives a comparison with a game of chess. So you can have a subjective set of rules to start with. So in that case, you choose outcomes that you want to get. So it's a subjective framework to start with about what is the outcomes that you would like to see, and then make agreement to say, yes, that's what we would like to see. And then from then on, you're able to, and that's equivalent to the rules of chess, which are completely arbitrary. But once you've made the decision that these are the rules that exist in chess, and yes, we both want to achieve a victory in a game, then you can objectively decide if a given move is the best move that could be made or not the best move. And that's the example he gives, which I think is quite.
So
quite
you're couching it within sort of a game theory framework?
Well, in this case,
No.
it's just saying that you can measure you can make objective measurement towards achieving a goal, but you have to have the goal to start with. It's a little bit like the is-ought problem.
Okay. But then that would sort of presuppose that since if any given outcome can be predetermined as being the ideal outcome, that does sort of mean that on a macro level, or sort of to take one step back, if all outcomes are equally good, if they're equally agreed upon, then that means that ultimately it's a subjective decision, isn't it?
Yeah, well, like, for example, you might decide that the world is about to die because of having too many people on it, and we've decided that as a group of people, we've got together and decided that what we need to do is reduce the population with certain sort of caveats.
Right.
Therefore, in that situation, acts that are in this world that we understand now would be considered immoral, may be considered moral because you're working towards a different set of goals, and those are agreed upon goals by the society.
Yeah, but then that's sort of the might makes right rule of morality,
not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Well, let's kind of stick with the definitions. Steve-O, did you have something?
I was just going to say,
But I already forgot what I was going to be. What Blog was saying about oh man, how I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right. Well, so I mean, I think the general, I guess, definition, if you want to say it, and you know, there might be some issues with it, but I think the general idea of what objective morality is that, you know, it's just the belief that there is morality or moral truths that are stance independent, you know, independent of a person's opinions, feelings, or the society or the culture. That you know, it kind of stands outside of what people think about. So,
and now go ahead, finish up. I got something to say on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what that means is that, you know, something that is moral for us now would be moral at any other time in human history as well. So in the past or the present. And that's where the theist claims of, you know, objective morality kind of falls, at least on the Christian one, where, you know, obviously there are things that were immoral, that are immoral now, that were okay and considered moral and even commanded by God in the past. And that's where they break that objective morality.
Yeah, like I was going to say, there is no such thing as objective morality, in my view, because norms, morals, everything that we develop over time as a civilization, no matter we're at time or wherever we live at, will change. Nothing stays the same. Different viewpoints take over, and everything, things just change. It's like societal drift. Nothing stays the same.
That's the problem with this this particular argument, because I've had Jamedith make arguments about how slavery was necessary in the past because of a lack of currency and banking and various sort of situations, which I don't think is necessarily wrong, because when situations are different, when the conditions in which you live are different, the morality that flows from that will necessarily be different. But you can't make an objective morality argument if things are changing, well, particularly not when you're appealing to a god.
Wait, hold on, Joe, you're on mute. Joe, you're on mute.
Another example is patricide. So, like it used to be immoral to kill your father, because if it wasn't, or it was illegal at least, it was a crime. Because if it wasn't, everybody would have done it because you would have got, you know,
well, actually, before we start,
but now there's no longer a need, and there's also, you know, you need to be protected from your father as well. So there are other kinds of considerations that might come up, and so maybe the morality of that issue has changed. I don't know how explicitly it has. I'm not so sure that you know, because I see morality as context dependent. I mean, that's the trouble with thinking of it as. It's the trouble of thinking in terms of moral rightness and wrongness when you're thinking
like absolute
moral judgments, as opposed to guilt and approbation like Hume does. This judgment, because then you can take context into account. It's not just the wrongdoing, but it's wrongdoing, you know, intentionally, blah, blah, blah. There have to be a lot of other conditions that
well, but then that would be subjective morality, right? Where it is dependent on society, culture, and etc. But before we kind of start arguing that, let me just complete the discussion on the definition. So, subjective morality is, of course, you know that it depends. It is stance dependent. It depends on time and culture, etc. But before I go, I think this is someone that I had run across on Twitter. So physics, philosophy, and faith, can you just confirm what your Twitter handle is? Because I can't quite remember. And I think he was here to kind of talk about divine command theory. But so he had made this comment about this is different from absolute morality, which is true for all situation, times, etc. So it gets a little more complex when you start talking about like moral realism and moral anti-realism. And I sometimes kind of use that interchangeably with objective and subjective morality. It's not technically correct, but in this discussion, let's not get into that. Let's kind of focus on objective and subjective morality. The other thing I wanted to, A. Strasser 116, yeah. So the other thing definition I wanted to kind of bring up for everyone is the the difference between normative ethics or normative morality and metaethics. So normative is if it actually, it's like the difference between is and the ought. The metaethics is a is that kind of describes why we have our moral values, why we think things are moral or immoral, and then the ought, which is the normative ethics, is to say things ought to be. This is something you ought to do. You ought not to kill. So let's just keep that in mind, because personally, I think you could argue that you can have objective metaethics where you are describing principles that are stance independent. Things like, like there's evolutionary ethics. So there are principles that are outside of our human mind, that can describe our kind of moral situation. So let's just keep that in mind. The divine command theory is, of course, the normative one, and we can get into that. But I kind of, in this slide, oh no, this isn't the slide. So in this slide, I kind of broke down the points, and this isn't comprehensive. These are just the ones I happened to have time to just write down before the show started.
Right.
But the points that someone like J. Edith is making is that he's saying that God is necessary for morality, and in addition, and this is actually a little bit different from point one, that morality is not possible at all unless it's objective. And I saw a video from Alex Malpass where he was kind of using this to turn around and say that God isn't possible, because the moral proof of God is that that God is necessary for morality, for objective morality, and premise 2, that objective morality exists, and conclusion is that God exists. But you can turn that around to say that keep the premise 1, God is necessary for objective morality, and then premise 2, I think I may mess up a little bit, but premise 2 is that there is no objective morality, and a conclusion is that there is no God. So that's sort of like that point 2 is kind of relevant to that. But let me just finish point 3 and 4. Atheism morally justifies rape and all these other things, and this is kind of argument that he tries to, kind of appeal to emotion kind of thing, to say, how atheism, because they don't have morality, they allow for everything, including, rape, incest, and whatever not. And then the following is that atheists are depraved regardless of their actions. Because J. Edith will just say, you atheists are all depraved, you guys are all monsters, regardless of your actions, right? But because you don't have morality, which is kind of a strange argument, because if you're saying that there is morality, it's not, and it's objective, that means that it applies to you whether you're an atheist or a Christian or theist or whatever, right? So you can't have atheists all of a sudden, be depraved just because they don't believe in a God, right? That morality exists regardless if what they're saying is true. So anyway, those are kind of what I distilled, from some of the points that Jim Edith was making. Any comments on that?
The other day, an idiot, and no, not really.
Yeah. But then, as I commented earlier, if you ask him if his deity lacks the ability to change their mind about what is objectively right and wrong, then he just spins further out of control and tries to claim that it's inherent moral nature, which he just digs himself deeper.
Well, so then let's just get into it. how is it? Why is it that that they're wrong? That they don't have. Well, actually, let's do this. Does anyone here think that there is such thing as objective morality?
I've already said no. So
No.
And Joe, I don't
Not
think you
ontologically,
believe
no.
so. Oh, you're on mute again, Joe.
you're muted again, buddy.
Joe, you're on mute.
Mute.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Sorry, I'm having trouble. But
Well, don't feel bad.
I'm confused what it could possibly mean to say that there's such a thing as objective morality. I'm confused as to what it could mean. And most
I
of
think the simple belief is that morality is the moral value is permanent, right? That it doesn't change; it's unchangeable.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that is the argument that is usually done. They usually do something like interfering with a child for fun, or that's the other one, torturing a child for fun. That's an example of something that will always be morally wrong, and therefore objective morality exists.
yeah.
You
Sure,
go,
but okay, so let's take that specific example, and I'll agree with you. But do you need a deity to tell you not to do that? And if you
Good
do,
point.
that says more about you than it does about me.
yeah, but if you presuppose that objective morality can only exist with a deity, then if you can give an example of a single objectively immoral action, therefore a deity exists.
Here's
That's
what
a
I
terrible
think.
argument.
Here is this objective morality, because I certainly believe this. If something is evil at a given time, I'm talking about a particular action, so a particular case of child abuse or whatever you want to say. If it's evil at a particular time, it will always be evil. Not doing that act in another context, who knows? I mean, it depends. I mean, maybe there's an excuse, maybe there's not. Who knows? But we're not going to reevaluate and say, oh, well, it was evil like back in 1980, but now we consider that, it has changed its moral value. In that sense, I believe in objective morality, in the sense that there are some things that are bad, and they're not bad just by happenstance. There's a more elaborate explanation that explains their badness, and it always comes out in that particular situation that it was bad. I mean, is that objective morality?
Yeah,
Were you gonna say something, Steve-O?
How should I put this? I get what you say with the child, like what they said with the child, torture and all that, whatever, but let me go back a few centuries, excuse me. Like let me a good smart play, like witch burning. Like back when like in the Salem witch trials and all that. Do we do that anymore? No, because we realized that it's beyond cruel, but and torture for a belief. So we don't practice it anymore. But back then, they felt that was part of the religion, part of the methodology that they needed to do. I'll lose my train of thought. I'm sorry. Give me a second here. It's like they think that was objectively right, that was objectively moral to do that, because it was evil within their communities when they couldn't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we've long since moved on from that. And now we realize how evil that was. So there is a shift. So I don't believe in absolute objective morality. There are still things that we, for the most part, agree upon as a community altogether that may be wrong, but there are some things that people may pick out and say this is different than how you feel or whatnot. So there's no absolute objective morality.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes. Aspects of it change. John, what's your opinion?
As far as Sorry, I was talking to fight. So if I
you're having fun on the live chat.
I was having fun in the comments.
Get out of here! Get out of here! We don't need.
My bad. I'm sorry. So please repeat the question.
Well, do you think that there is anything such a thing as objective morality?
I've yet to find an example of one.
So, I mean, the ones that I think, like Blark said, let's just say, child rape.
Sure.
Would that be would that be considered wrong throughout any point in human history?
So this
at every point in human history.
Yeah, so this is the point that I've made in the comments section, which is that I'm sure that from our modern perspective, looking backwards, there are many things that we can define today rather easily as being abhorrent, repugnant, and wrong. However, those definitions, because they're coming from a modern perspective looking backwards, then that in and of itself means that our definitions are subjective. And therefore, the application of those definitions to create the framework for determining murder and messing with children for fun, etc., those then become subjective assessments.
So what you're saying is that even if there's an action that is wrong at any point in human history, our judgment will always be subjective about that action.
Yes. Yeah. And this is what I was talking about in the comment section right now, which is define torture.
Yeah. So I think what happens is like, for example, murder. And the funny thing about, these Christians is that, when you ask them to try to, prove that there is objective morality, they'll give me an example of something that's objectively immoral. And they'll come up with examples like, well, killing and raping children is wrong. It's like any moral system that you can come up with, except like the most depraved ones, are going to come to that same conclusion, right? So it's not some...
Ironically, though, you can justify that by using the Bible.
Yeah.
There are multiple ways to do it. For example, the genocide of the Midianites involves taking the girl children who hadn't known a man for themselves, which is quite obvious. But also there is those rules in, is it Deuteronomy or Exodus, that have if a man lies with a girl and she's not betrothed to somebody, and they get found out, he has to pay a fine, which therefore indicates that it's not the lying with her that's the problem. So they're not saying that there's anything wrong. Or in that case, he grabs her, and so this is a forced action. And as it's clearly a person who is underage. It's not the act of grabbing her and lying with her that creates the problem. The problem is that she's not. That she wasn't betrothed to somebody, and therefore it's okay. So in the other cases, if she is betrothed to someone or she's somebody else's wife, then it's stoning to death is what happens. So you can then therefore make that as an argument to say, look, it's perfectly fine to do that, just so long as later on I pay the dad some money and marry her. You can justify that action.
Yes, that's true. And I want to bring
out this is not uncommon, where people develop moral systems not to explain what makes morality objective, but to justify doing horrible things to other people.
The crux of it right there,
exactly
really.
right.
So here's the question.
That's the crux of everything.
Here's the question that I have for y'all. Is there, if I were through my inaction allow a person to die, like I knew how to stop the killing of a person, and through my inaction, that person died. Most of you, I'm sure, would consider that to be an immoral act. Am I off base?
No, I mean that's a trolley problem, right?
Right. So here's the question. If I allowed through my inaction 10 people, 100 people, how about over 20,000 through my inaction? Would that be immoral?
I mean,
I
it's
am
the same
going
thing
to.
regardless. You know, it doesn't matter that many people. If you're going to classify as more for just one, it's more for all.
Okay.
Yep.
Because Winston Churchill deliberately didn't act on the intelligence during World War II so that he wouldn't tip his hand that the Enigma machine had cracked their code. And in so doing, served the greater good of ending World War II early. So does that is through his inaction, he had the ability to stop those deaths, stop those bombings.
Well,
That's
I mean,
my point.
I mean, the point is that there are kind of differences in moral beliefs, right? Different people have different disagreements of what's moral. So that is an argument against subjective morality, right? How can we have objective morality?
That's my point. That's where I was.
And then at the same time, you know, it depends on your station or where you're at. Like with Churchill, he was the leader of a country. If it was just me doing that, it becomes different. Different circumstances.
So if the situations that surround it determine whether or not it's moral or immoral, that means it's subjective rather than objective.
No, but some people would say that was wrong. And just going back to kind of the God thing, the Christian point of view, the problem is that they really can't explain anything beyond, oh, murder is wrong or child rape is wrong. If you gave them the trolley problem, they have no way to apply their quote unquote objective morality to that trolley problem. Every Christian should always give the exact same answer to the trolley problem, but they don't.
Yeah, because it's written on their hearts.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, here's the thing. Also, if you let's say I was to kill somebody, like murder somebody, right? You would think that'd be immoral, but now let me change the parameters a little bit. What happens if I murdered somebody to save their life? You know, therefore, is it subjective? Yes, because I had to make a choice. Therefore, I didn't follow just a standard cookie cutout set of laws. I had to make a choice.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, there are some moral systems where, you know, the consequences don't matter. So again, all these kind of depends on which particular moral system that, you know, you subscribe to. But it comes down to, you know, how can a Christian claim that they have objective morality when they cannot meet any of the kind of the criteria for things being objective.
That's true. I mean,
and also it's completely impractical. Like I said, like with the trolley problem, there isn't any way for you to use your Christian morality to figure out what is right or wrong, or at least not in an objective way. Because, you know, if you take a group of Christians and ask them whether it's right or if homosexuality is right or wrong, you're not going to get, you know, unanimity.
Yeah, and in fact, in some cases, if you ask two of them, you'll get three opinions.
Yeah. So then, well, so there's that where you basically don't have ability to kind of use Christian morality to determine things. But the other argument I've heard is that basically, you know, kind of going to what Blark said, that that morality is written in your heart. So your sense of what is wrong, right, what is right or wrong, your innate sense. And I think most of us would agree that we all have an innate sense of what is right or wrong. And what the Christian would say is that that innate sense comes from God. And when I asked a question to Jim Edith about, you know, like, you know, how can you determine what is right or wrong? Because only God would know, right, whether a particular act was right or wrong. And his response was, basically, it doesn't matter as long as you kind of act with the kind of, you know, that aligns with your innate moral sense, because then God would figure it out at the end. You know, it's basically kill them all and let God sort it out kind of viewpoint.
One of the most famous things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
it certainly explains why they support sort of indiscriminate killing and being quite keen on the death penalty, because it doesn't matter. God will sort it out.
yeah. And where that leads to is the kind of the difference, and this is where I want to kind of bring up what I consider to be the subjectivism of Christianity, is that the difference between kind of the ontology, the moral ontology, and the epistemology, the moral epistemology. Even if there is an objective morality, and let's say that it is God that instantiates it, if we can't know whether something is moral or not, then what do you have? You don't have anything. I mean, you're back to your subjectivism, because at least with with Christianity and a lot of religion, it all comes down to the particular person, an individual, having a specific interpretation of what they think that God thinks is right or wrong. So it all comes down to that particular individual. I mean, there's a reason why every version of Jesus that all the Christians believe, they all happen to, agree with all the different prejudices and bigotry they happen to have. So if you believe that homosexuality is fine or moral, then the version of God that you believe thinks it's moral. If you think it's immoral, the version of God you believe thinks it's immoral, right? So it is pure subjectivism in the sense that it completely depends on the individual's subjective view of what they think is right or wrong.
And they don't even realize the irony when they try to argue that.
Yeah, when they say it, they have objective morality. All they have is just a label saying that my actions are objectively moral because I'm going to claim that, God makes it moral.
Yeah, and they can't all be right, but they can all be wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
But particularly when they have mutually exclusive opinions.
Let me just ask Alex. So physics, philosophy, and faith is Alex. Actually, let me just share his profile so that you guys can see. This is it. And I think he's actually I think he's a kind of good follow. I like the post that he had. So Alex, if you I don't know if you want to join, I can give you the invite for you to connect in. It's up to you. And
if he wants to join, you could drop me out. So if he wants to talk.
Okay. So it's up to you, Alex. Let me just remove that. But let me just. Oh, he said he'll join. Okay.
Yeah, just drop me back into the back rooms.
Okay. All right. So I just put the link in the comments. It's to StreamYard. You just connect in, you don't have to turn your video on unless you want to. Obviously, your profile already has your picture, so it's up to you. Joe's the only one with camera on, so maybe he might enjoy having another person, another talking head on as well. But let me go back to his comments. Okay, people try to argue against realism from disagreement. But subjectivism is about the nature of moral explanation, not a question of epistemology. Yeah, I mean, oh, there he is. Let me. Yep. Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Hey, before we get into the discussion, let me just give you a little opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the rest of the group here. And obviously, you don't need to share specific details or anything that could dox you, but maybe just a bit about your background, your beliefs, and anything else that you think might be interesting.
Sure. Let's see. So first question is, I'm hearing things twice. Is there a way to not do that?
Oh, yeah, you have to turn off the stream that you're watching, and you should just watch it only on
That
on the
makes a lot of
StreamYard.
sense. Okay, cool. My name's Alex Strasser. I'm a PhD student in material science, and I'm very interested in philosophy. And I don't know.
And religion, right? According to your profile.
Yes, yes. So, and I'm a Christian. I'm like trying to do research in philosophy, trying to get published on it. I've presented at a couple of philosophy conferences, but not published yet. Hopefully I will. I'm working on a theistic normative ethical theory that is not like about divine commands. But yeah.
Do you have it pre-printed anywhere?
Yes, I have a version of it on my website, Gospel Demands. Should I like?
Okay. Yeah, you can just post a link in the comments.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm a very, I guess I can. I'm very consequentialist. So I prefer consequentialist versions of.
And you're still a Christian.
Yes.
Okay.
So
all right. Well, then let me just take a little time just to kind of go through the rest of the panel. Joe, if you want, quickly introduce yourself.
I think we've interacted on Twitter.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Joe Campbell. I'm a retired professor.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice to formally meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Blarg, if you want to go.
Yes, I represent the other half of the planet from Australia, if the accent doesn't give it away. Yes, I have degrees in physics and engineering, and lifelong atheist, but always happy to chat with theists who are open and honest and friendly. We deal with a lot of the other type. In some of the comments. So we've had a couple of really good conversations with theists. And we also have Neil, who is a theist in the group, but a different variety. So I'll let him do his thing.
Nice.
So
Sweet.
welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, hello. Yep. So I'm Neil. Background in chemistry, and sort of main work is sort of admin in the social side and the law and order side. As said, I'm the token theist on the panel, and I describe myself as a agnostic pantheist, but more on that later.
But actually, Joe is also not an atheist. Right, Joe?
That's right. Right now, I'm a pantheist.
Very
So
interesting.
we have
Me
like
too.
half and half in terms of atheists and non-atheists. And then we have John.
Who would have thought that'd happen?
Go ahead, John.
Well, hello. How you doing? It's great to have you on the. It's great to talk to you tonight.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's all you're going to say, John? I think John is like trying to come up with some pun that he can tell us why he doesn't want to say too much. He's our punster.
Most of my puns are just 2/3 of a pun. They're just PU.
Nice. That was good.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
was good. Okay.
So I am an atheist. The term that I've heard that I've started really using is igtheist. The concept of a god, and it is almost without a definition in and of itself, and without even that as a foundation for even getting to the question of whether or not God exists. So since we can't even define it and we can't find any evidence for it, there's no reason to conclude that physically or intellectually the question is with merit.
and then I'll go. So you can just call me Q or QC on Twitter. You know, I have the handle Challenge Belief, and my YouTube channel has Challenge Your Beliefs. So I've been a Christian for most of my young adult life, but in college I became more of an agnostic, sort of like, you know, what John's like atheist kind of thing, where I felt that the question of the human question was more important than the question of the existence of God. And then relatively recently, I've, you know, probably about a year, I've taken more of a hard stance of being a hard atheist, where I do not believe that God exists at all. So it's not just that I don't believe in God, but I believe that no God exists. And I have a philosophy. I have a bachelor degree in philosophy, but I have significant science background as well. I went to graduate school in a PhD program in molecular biology, but I kind of changed my career just in terms of where the industry was. So I have like worked in labs and stuff, and but you know, that's pretty much it. And also in philosophy, you know, unlike you, I haven't like published anything. It was like my undergrad degree was like philosophy and biology, but you know, my institution didn't have a double major at the time, so I basically kind of fulfilled the requirement of both, and I was doing it really to get into a PhD program. So you know, in a certain sense, you know, philosophy was kind of my a way to get kind of educated in how to think. That's how I was looking at it. But yeah, I didn't really go into academia with the philosophy. So, yep. So that's all. So we have a pretty good variety, and we have a couple other people that come in at different times. So there's a few more in the panel. All right. So with that out of the way, let me just go back to what you had posted, because I mean, I pretty much I agree with you, because the question about or the point about the epistemology is really about you know, it kind of goes to the divine command theory, where you know, when you talk about morality coming from nature of God, unless you have direct access to that nature, you know, how do you derive your moral duties and moral values? Because ultimately what you're doing is you're just reading, you know, the scriptures and interpreting it to kind of figure out, you know, what does God want from us? And, you know, that interpretation of that varies quite a bit. So that's where, you know, epistemologist probably wasn't the right word, but that's kind of the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I see. I think most divine command theorists, I mean, like Robert Adams is probably the most famous, and most, you know, like William Lane Craig and people who talk about like theistic ethics kind of rely a lot on Robert Adams' view. And he is very readily accepting of, like, you know, it's not just like, yeah, it's not just special revelation, you know, and even not primarily special revelation. You know, he has a whole like social approach where it's, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, in Christian ethics, it's usually a combination of, you know, you have like like the whatever. I mean, it's technically for hermeneutics, I think, but like the Wesleyan quadrilateral, I think, like reason, scripture, tradition, something else. But I guess, like, yeah, you're normally combining thoughts of, you know, you have your conscience and you know, I think Christian ethicists use the same like standard methodology in a lot of ethics, like reflective equilibrium. Okay, like some people debate whether or not that's like a great methodology, but you know, it's some kind of trade-offs between theoretical intuitions, pre-theoretical intuitions, or pre-theoretical intuitions are those intuitions about kind of like those very specific cases, like the cases you were mentioning about like whatever child torture or stuff like that. So like this is a case where it's like obviously wrong, And then I have like a theoretical intuition that's like, we should always do the best possible thing. But there's certain cases where those come into conflict, and so I need to make these trade-offs and balancing act between like those combinations of things. And the divine command theorist, like Robert Adams, for example, he doesn't say like, okay, you need to know that this is a divine command, but it's just about like, you don't need to recognize that this is like from God or something ultimately sourced in God, or like any facts about the nature of God in order to know that these things are right and wrong. And so the fact that like there's disagreement and stuff, yeah, I think like Christian ethicists are no different than any others in thinking that doing ethics well is hard, and I don't think that theism offers a magical solution to knowing right and wrong. I think it is difficult to get at the right answers, and I think that maybe there's a good explanation there. But I won't pretend to try to like know that. Anyway, yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, so just to kind of, for the rest of the audience, let's try to kind of like keep it less technical and try to kind of explain it in more layman terms. But I mean, I didn't read too much into Robert Adams. I mean, you sent me that video. I haven't had a chance to look through your response, but I did kind of look at the original discussion. But I do agree with Alex that, I feel like Adams kind of kicks the can down the line a little bit, but let's not get into that here. I think that might be like a separate discussion we can have. But it sounds like what you're basically saying is that, the way different people, regardless of whether they're atheists or Christians or whatnot, the way they think about morality is, it's really no different, whether it's a Christian or not Christian. It's just that from your point of view, you can just say that there's a foundation that, kind of justifies the morality, even if you get it wrong. Is that kind of a good way to like laymanize what you were saying?
Yeah, I'd say so. Wait one sec. So yeah, I would say yeah, that there's some like so I'm not convinced that like the moral argument is a great argument. So
Yeah.
But so I do think like theists can say, okay, we can go like one step further or something like that, to say that like, yeah, there's going to be some rock bottom point somewhere. And I think, an atheist who believes in objective morality is just going to say it bottoms out in like, yeah, there's just a fact of the matter about, independent of what anybody believes about like punching people in the face for fun, then like this thing solely in virtue of it, like, I guess causing pain pointlessly or whatever, kind of explains why this moral property of wrongness, this action carries this moral property of wrongness or something like that. And the theist, is going to say something like, and then what explains like why it carries that moral property is it aligns with like the divine nature in such and such way. And yeah, I guess I'm not going to make a claim that like it is one further level of explanation, which I guess is desirable in a theory to like get at, explanatory power or something. But I guess I'm not here to make that defense, to try to say that like the theistic theory is a better explanation, but I don't think that it is a subjective theory because there is this like disagreement, or because the explanation is divine commands, because I don't think divine commands are subjective states, which I think that's like what subjective theories are trying to get at, is about like subjective states or subjective attitudes towards certain like truths about the wrongness of actions. And since divine commands aren't like subjective states, then I wouldn't think that would make it a like a subjective theory.
Well, then let me. There's two things. I can't remember. I don't know which one would be better to pose to you first. But so, how do you then explain the issue of there, within the Bible, things that we would consider to be immoral, like war crimes, being actually commanded by God? So this isn't someone kind of like, thinking that, hey, what I'm doing is right or wrong. This is within the Bible. This is someone that is directly getting a command from God to go and commit war crimes.
I don't have settled thoughts here. I'm kind of like, I don't know, I guess agnostic on exactly what's going on. Like yeah, you have the whatever Paul Copan type genocide apologists that try to appeal to whatever, like, okay, it was exaggerated, and then you see in like Joshua or Judges or whatever, it already admits that like they didn't fully drive out all the people, so maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. Okay, wartime language in the ancient Near East was like exaggerated to try to like demonstrate how great their God was or whatever, and the ancient Israelites were like conforming to that cultural pattern, and so whatever, maybe that's okay. And then on the other hand, make it a little bit more liberal, whatever, theologically liberal, like Randall Rouser, he kind of puts his like moral intuition, primacy of moral intuition. So he says like, well, this is like super implausible that God would command this, and so therefore I'm going to infer that like the Israelites kind of were confused about, or maybe not necessarily confused, it could have been intentional, that they were like, they wanted to carry out this kind of like warlike conquering of peoples, and they like just kind of claimed that they were commanded by God to, something maybe that developed later in the tradition. And I don't know, like, I guess I don't find that's like, maybe like mildly theologically uncomfortable for where I'm at right now. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
guess
I
like
think.
it wouldn't challenge my like Christianity to do that. Yeah.
Okay, because I was just thinking, the scripture makes it hard to, support divine command theory or even a modified one. If it was more of kind of a generic deism, I think you'd be in a stronger position. But my second question was, so you do accept that the non-modified divine command theory is problematic, right?
Where modified just means that you add like the necessary connection between the grounding of moral obligations and his divine nature. Wasn't that the
Right.
point of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think the modified. Yeah, I think we should accept the modified view. Well, I don't think we should accept it, but I think the modified view is preferable to the non-modified view. Yes.
Okay. Let me then open it up to anyone. Do you guys want to add to that, or have any questions for Alex?
So I apologize. I have been spending a lot more time in the comment section with this discussion than I have in the past. So if you've already addressed this, then I apologize for just not catching it.
No worries.
But in order for there to be an objective morality or an objective position, well, first let me ask. So your position is that objective moral stances exist.
Yes.
Okay. And that morality comes from your deity as an objective source?
The way that I would put it would just be to say that like the explanation of what makes actions right and wrong, like God features into those explanations.
Features or is dependent?
I guess the correct explanation includes God, so I guess like yes, the explanation depends on God. I think
So it's a necessary element.
Right. So okay. So that's your. So the existence of a deity would then be sort of the first domino. Would be the beginnings of the foundation on which you're building the objective moral, an objective morality existing. Unless I'm wrong.
I think it's perfectly fine that like atheists be objective moral realists, and I think that they should be. So I guess like on on so I guess like I wouldn't argue that atheists like uh if they accept objective morality should be theists. Because I think the only reason that like you would accept my view is if you already believed that God existed.
Right. That kind of makes it presuppositional.
Right, basically, yeah, it'd
Okay.
be question begging or presuppositional or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I do
and-
think
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to pick it apart. I am trying to just sort of understand
mhm.
where you're
Yeah.
coming from, and I guess
So
Would
given
it-
that I am a theist, and I'm trying to like I'm trying to think about if God exists, how would he feature into, I guess, our moral explanations or explanations of why things are right and wrong. And I would think that he would feature into those explanations. And so it kind of the starting point for me is like God exists, and therefore I'm going to
Okay.
think that he is featured in the explanation of
Okay.
moral right and wrong. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, and this is going to sound a little weird coming from me, but let's presuppose that let's go ahead and use a presupposition that your specific deity, as you understand it, exists. I guess does your deity have the ability to change their mind about what is right and wrong?
I think so. I guess I can elaborate a little bit of my view, since you are asking me
Yeah,
my view.
like I said, I mean, it does kind of go. It does kind of go to the core of my
Mhm.
disbelief in objective morality. But I'm genuinely curious on
Yeah.
how you reconcile what I know. You're very clever, so I think you know what my follow up to that question is going to be, regardless of how you answer. But I'm genuinely curious in what you have to say on it.
Sure, yeah. So I get to divine commands eventually. It's not the starting point for my theory. My theory, I don't know, like I don't want to be annoying and I have like a weird view or whatever, but so I'm trying to develop this view, like it's under construction basically, which I guess I shouldn't avoid using that term. But that's the epistemological. But anyway, so divine glory consequentialism. So we should maximize glory to God. What is glory to God? Glory to God means some type of like respect, honor, and admiration. And then based on respect, so what counts as respecting God? So we respect God when we respect his creatures. So we need to like love other human beings, and also like take care of animals, all that stuff. So you try to derive all of these like moral obligations from that starting point, and commands I think follow from respect. So we get to commands eventually, and then we can talk about that. That's where God could like change potentially where morality is, in my view. So yeah, so it would still come in, I think, like with the commands perhaps primarily.
Right, but then wouldn't that ultimately make the position subjective?
So the commands, so I think, I would adopt the same type of like restricting of divine commands in virtue of God's nature with modified divine command theory. So the commands are going to be rooted in his nature, which is like necessarily
right. But you see
such
how
and such
quickly that
ways.
gets caught in a quagmire.
I guess not really, since his nature is like necessary. So what can you elaborate?
So okay,
I mean,
well, first of
there's
all,
like the euthyphro, but
well, yeah. So I mean, first you have to establish an ability to objectively discern what God's nature is, because without an objective understanding of that, then the rest of your understanding necessarily does not follow, does it?
Yes. Well, I guess, there's like a prior starting point of like, if we believe in God, what is the kind of being that God is? And presumably omnibenevolence is going to be part of that concept of God.
Right.
And
I heard the word assume and my hair caught fire. I'm sorry.
yeah, because I guess like usually when we talk about God, I guess there's a few competing. I really love this book called Depicting Deity by Jonathan Quanvig, however you say it. But perfect being theology is like the standard starting point of like the fundamental, like what does it mean to even call something God? And that starting point is like the greatest possible being or the greatest conceivable being or whatever. I guess there's a couple ways to catch that out. And so like so if we understand like we are going to have to use some of our own intuitions from like what is good, whatever, in order to inform part of like what we know about God's nature. And I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, there's going to be kind of like trade-offs and in the same type of normal moral reasoning. But yeah, we can like use our intuition and think about like, okay, torture is bad and blah, blah, blah. So therefore, like God's nature of being good is going to be such that he would not command torture, stuff like that, I think is perfectly on the table.
Doesn't my intuition tell me that the woman down the street is a witch?
Does it? I mean, I wouldn't think so.
How come?
I
mean, I know in my bones. I see how she behaves, and I know what a witch is. I know that deep in my bones, and she's acting the way that a witch does. Therefore, she's a witch.
I mean, do you? Is that right?
No.
The thing is, but Alex, she turned me into a newt.
She turned.
I got better though. I got better though.
Yes.
2 points, Q. But no. Your response is with merit. But do you see the point that I'm trying to make with my setup and your response? Do you really have that intuition? Well, that's exactly that. That's where I'm going with this. My intuition tells me that the Earth is flat and that the sun revolves around the Earth. Because my intuition says I don't feel that I'm moving, but I see the sun moving. My intuition says that when I paint this picture on my cave wall of a bear, I see a bear. So therefore, my intuition tells me I should paint this picture on my cave wall.
Yeah, but John, I think Alex is, allowing for errors, right? Mistakes.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But that error means that intuition can't be used to discern the nature of God because it's so prone to error.
So I guess the key debate would be just how prone is our intuition to error, like, and I guess so. Obviously, when I say we have to rely on our intuition,
we've got about 10,000 years of human history that speaks to that.
Yeah, and so when I guess. So in endorsing some type of intuitions are indispensable to coming to like moral truths or something, I wouldn't want to like. So I'm somebody who distinguishes between science and philosophy, and I don't know. There's like a whole methodological discussion we can have about how to do that. I think our intuitions can certainly be wrong. I think we need to test them against whatever evidence we can gather. I think in the scientific case, we can gather objective evidence. I think that's not true with ethics.
Well, let me just step in here. I mean, the problem I see here is, Alex, you're almost kind of stepping away from the normative ethics part of your, Christian ethics. You're kind of saying, here's how I can explain why things are moral and not moral, because you are starting with the assumption that, you know, it is God that's making things moral.
Yes, we are now in very different territory than debating like which normative ethical theory is correct and debating how can we know like right and wrong generally. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other question I had for you was that how is it that you're just not defining a God into existence? You're kind of like reverse engineering a God.
Well, we can have a concept of God. So I would not say that. So I think it's more of a conditional claim. So if God exists, then he would have these properties. Like I think,
Yeah, but that connection is the kind of the reverse engineering, the defining, right? So you're saying if God exists and you make this connection saying it should be this and this and that, and without, I mean, I don't see how that's not ad hoc. Right,
you
because I
don't.
mean, just because you know, if God exists, therefore this doesn't mean that actually is the case. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So I guess now we would be getting into territory of like why I believe God exists in the first place, which we can
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I think you're
Yeah,
right. Then we kind of go into a different
so
realm.
Alex, I find from a, and this is not to be dismissive, but it's going to sound that way. From a philosophical navel gazing perspective, I find a lot of what you have to offer thought provoking and interesting, but as an actual applicable argument framework, I'm not quite sure what word I want to use there. I'm
So wait, I mean, I see where you're. So Alex, the issue from an atheist point of view
yeah.
to kind of Christian morality and all that is that they position themselves to having this divine authority to validate their positions. And we're talking about things like policies and how we treat other people, right? So when you have a Christian that comes and says that gays are immoral, and or trans people are just abominations, then that's where we get into an issue where it's no longer the kind of navel gazing that John's talking about. Now we're getting into kind of the significance to say that, okay, now you can't be wrong, right? If you're going to use this to justify potentially taking away rights from all women or whatever, then it kind of becomes a different discussion.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, I definitely think there's plenty of maybe uncareful reasoning that happens here and wielding of, you know, whether a traditional or, yeah, I mean, usually, you know, the traditional like Christian views to as like a sledgehammer to, or, you know, to justify whatever political positions. Yeah, some of which I find problematic, but I guess, yeah, now we're in like really different territory.
Yeah.
Can
I guess
ask a
here's
question?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Luck.
Yeah, I just wanted to take it back to the earlier discussion about the sort of construction of the framework that you're working on, Alex. You basically said, like, you start from the assumption of God exists, and then work to construct your framework from there, and that's where you're going from here. But from an academic slash intellectual completeness perspective, have you tried doing the same thing without making that assumption first?
I guess if I so I've spent, I guess, less time on it. I read a good chunk of ethics papers, but I would still be like, you know, I'd still be a consequentialist. I would probably be like, I would probably be a non-utilitarian consequentialist, um, or or like a very expansive objective list, because there's like different views on what welfare is. And if you include like a lot of stuff in welfare and like what is good for people, if you include things like knowledge and friendship and other relationships and loving people as like constitutive of what is good for you, then maybe I could be a utilitarian, but probably I'd be like a non-utilitarian consequentialist.
It's more about, my question's more about, do you basically, can you get to the same place, establishing a coherent framework, which is essentially what you're trying to achieve, that achieves all of your other outcomes, but doesn't start from the assumption that God's necessary?
I think so. Yeah, I guess like plausibly a theistic one has like a little bit of an advantage in explanatory power, but I'm not really even confident in that. But I definitely think there is like a coherent and for an atheist, like compelling, or at least sufficiently compelling, like atheistic objective morality. Like I think Eric Wielenberg in his like robust ethics, like I don't know, like I think William Lane Craig has like some interesting criticisms about the Platonism inherent in his view, but yeah, like I think there's certainly coherent, and if I were an atheist, I would be a realist. Yeah, I guess like I do think the moral knowledge argument is more compelling than like the moral argument that's based on ontology that has to get into like the evolutionary debunking of morality. That is somewhere where I do think the theist has an advantage, that it can better explain, not given the like hypothetical counter, like other possible worlds where we evolved, differently. If you only have evolutionary naturalism pushing our like intuitions and stuff, then it's unlikely, or at least we could have very easily had very different like moral, I guess, intuitions and beliefs. So that is an argument I do find compelling.
Yeah, because that's in some ways that's exactly the place I was thinking. Like we've ended up with this sort of evolved, from my perspective, this evolved moral sense, and it's evolved in this particular way because of the situation that we find ourselves in. It it works well for the type of species we are, the type of environment we evolved in, the size and development level of our offspring, the frequency of giving birth to those offspring, how hard it is to get food, etc., etc., etc. That evolved morality, or inherent sense of the way things work, fits well with that background that we understand. It also strongly it gives very good answers for why people like serial killers, psychopaths, and people who are antisocial exist, because essentially they behave in the same way that social characteristic fits the same way a parasite fits. It consumes the host, which is in this case society, that is formed using this set of rules. It benefits itself, but if it becomes too extreme, it gets found out and is killed off, or in some other way excluded. And so it explains everything we see quite well. It also would say that if, for example, humans were a bit more like sunfish, for example, and we had 1 million offspring every single time that occurs, the way in which we look at caring for our offspring would be very, very different. Our moral intuition on the harming of children would necessarily be can't really care because there's pretty well a million others that and we only need one of them to survive out of it. So we end up with a very different outcome, and I think it results in a better explanation of the human condition, rather than starting from a fixed point and then trying to construct everything around the framework of some sort of special being that doesn't suffer from the human condition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So do you think that this, I guess, like the evolutionary naturalist position that you've sketched, do you think that like you think that would undermine an objective morality, or at least objective moral knowledge? Like, so the implication of what you just described would be that there are not like objective moral truths that we know. Would you agree with that or not?
It again gets into that space between the uncertainty of what objective means. Under the evolved condition we are, we get that sort of question about, is it immoral to harm children? And the intuition we end up with is, yes, it's definitely immoral to harm children. But that is necessarily a result of the evolved condition. That's something that I think is true because of who we are as a species. So you could argue that this is an objective truth, but it's an objective truth that derives from evolution, not from any truth giver.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that if...
Sorry, I was on mute. But so Blarg, I think, like, I would say that it is objective in the sense that the principles that drive evolutionary naturalism, evolutionary ethics, is an objective principle. Kind of like, survival of the fittest, random mutation, all that. Those are kind of principles that drive evolution. So I think the principles that drive the kind of the formation of the specific ethical views, even if it may depend on constraints like, fecundity and, availability of food, etc. The principles would still be objective. That would be kind of my take on it. But as we're kind of...
I think that's
go ahead.
that's where I basically what I was trying to get to.
Nope. Sorry,
I think that's what
Neil, before you
say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what Blarg's trying to say is, while the principles might be objective, the pain being objectively good or bad isn't actually objective.
Yeah,
It's
but I mean, I don't think
dependent
that takes it.
situation.
That doesn't make it not objective morality. It was still make it
let's
objective.
take as an example. Imagine we're a species that have to undergo pain in order to become adults.
Yep.
Then pain is necessarily good.
But the principles that landed us in that position would still be the same.
So we've got two opposing views, one where pain is bad, one where pain is good. There is no objectively good or bad for that pain.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of say sort of, what gets derived from the objective principles might vary. But yeah, I mean, because we're kind of running out of time, I wanted to give Joe a chance, because I think you're trying to say something, right, Joe? Or
yeah, I wanted to get to the relationship between God's nature and God's commandments, because a lot of the explanation that you were giving, like you talk about moral intuitions, and a lot of this is very consistent with, say, like Humean sentimentalism or something. And I think that this is, this is what Blarg was getting at, I think, too, that we might have these sorts of very naturalistic explanations that warrant a large part of morality. This is actually also one of the reasons why I'm kind of drifting towards pantheism, because I do wonder, once you add the element of commands, it really, like if you think of Christian morality, for instance, a lot of what secularists or atheists object to about Christian morality, things about gay sex or other things like that, is because it seems unintuitive. Like, it seems unintuitive to me that sexual orientation between two consenting adults would have anything to do with morality, at all. So it looks a little odd if you think that there's this naturalistic part of ethics that we could explain with God or without God, and sort of the same. And then when we add this sort of element of commandments, you can put in anything, right? I mean, if God commands whatever he wants, it should be able to work. And if that isn't right, then what is the function of the commandments in the first place? So what is that relationship to you? What is the function of divine commandments? Do you need divine commandments? Could you explain it in terms of evolved intuitions or that hook up with God's nature or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think that one of the motivations for adding or including divine commands is maybe you disagree with this, but like the if I'm going to use a fancy word, phenomenology, but like the experience we have of moral obligations is something that's like feels like this external force pulling us outside of ourselves. And yeah, I think there's something reasonable about thinking that if a person issues a command and that person stands in relation to in the right relationship to that person, namely one of authority, like in the right authority, then that's going to result in this feeling of being compelled towards this thing or something like that. And so I think, like, I don't know, I'm not going to say that that's like way better or whatever, but I do think that that's like a reasonable motivation for thinking that divine commands kind of would explain the kind of force that we feel in those in our moral obligations that I guess would be absent otherwise.
You could have a moral sense. You could think that something might be wrong, but you still might not feel an obligation not to do it. That's an additional sort of thing, and maybe the commandment helped in that. Like,
here's where and I wanted to jump in, and I think Joe's asked some really great questions. And to your point, Alex, that sense of obligation, I've yet to hear of an emotional response to something that we can't, through imaging of the brain, map out the biochemical responses of the brain going through that. So there's, in other words, there is a physical world explanation for any given emotion. What I haven't, and we've seen evidence of that, but what I'm not aware of, and if you are, then please point me in that direction, of any evidence that there is anything to emotions beyond that biochemical response. And without that extra piece, then the divine in the divine theory or the divine command can't be established. And that's where I'm kind of having some difficulty with what you're talking about in terms of that moral push that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I'm misrepresenting your position.
I don't think so. I think when it comes to brain chemistry and things like that, yeah, that's a reasonable thought. But when I'm trying to say that God's commands kind of explain that emotion, I'm happy to say that there is, a very close link between like our emotional state and our brain states, and we can like link those two very closely. There's a very strong correlation.
I would say that Venn diagram is a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without anything outside of the Venn diagram, we don't have any way of establishing the divine and the divine command.
So I guess, yeah. So I think like the theist, I think it's reasonable to say like, why do we have those brain states going off? And the answer is going to be something like in the outside causing. Like that's not to say that like, okay, I'm looking at a brain map, these things are lighting up. We don't know, like, that's not to say that like cognitive science is incomplete or whatever. But it's like whenever we we see someone hurting, and then we see this biochemical like interactions or whatever, then that is, like the link without God is just to say, whatever, like sad things or whatever. But with God is like, okay, there's I guess that's not a good example because I'm talking about obligation specifically. So you'd have to find a scenario where, you encounter something where you're specifically feel pulled to like help, like, so, but you can theoretically do the same experiment if you encounter a truly like morally significant scenario in a lab where you're able to like measure them. And then the theist, like, then I would just say what explains why those biochemical reactions are happening is because there is this external force that's resulting in this pull, which isn't to say that, yeah, I mean, and I think that's like a reasonable motivation for commands.
Okay, so I will absolutely concede the point that there's an external stimuli that causes the biochemical internal reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's how cause and effect works.
Yeah.
So I think where you and I kind of differ is we can keep following that cause and effect backwards until one and or both of us just say, I don't know, which is and that's a completely reasonable status to be in. I don't know is a perfectly good answer. It just can't be the last one. Where I'm coming from is for you to say that you do know because it comes from this divine command is that explanation. But then my follow-up question is the same that you ask me, which is, okay, how do we then know that that's coming from a divine command? How do we quantify it and solidify our knowledge? It can't be intuition. We've already established that intuition is a terrible metric for determining that something is true. So then what is that process, and how do we then even begin to have that first domino, that foundational understanding?
Well, let me just bring this to a close, just because I think we're drifting a little bit. Because, I mean, to be fair to Alex, I think he's saying that he has kind of separate reason for believing in God, and the morality is kind of being derived from that initial belief. So, I mean, I think maybe...
just to kind of sum it up and to put a button on it, Alex, the biggest problem that I see in putting together your theory is we have so many different understandings of what God's divine nature is, that to be able to establish that your understanding of it, which you're using as the foundation for your theory, your philosophical theory, that's going to come up to a lot of scrutiny. But if we can establish objective morality external from any definition of God, and I'm not saying just that we can, but if we can establish objective morality external from God, then what do we need a God for? So those are the two, and it's not to discourage. I actually want to encourage you, because I think this is a really wonderful piece of research that you're doing. But those are the two kind of problems that I see ahead of you.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah. So let me just close here. So, Alex, I usually try to keep this to 1.5 hours, but we have,
my bad.
we
Thanks-
usually
thanks for the
go a
discussion.
little bit beyond. But I'll just have to, I'll be the first one to say how it's kind of very refreshing to talk to a Christian who's willing to kind of have the discussion and kind of be rational and have the kind of the back and forth. Without kind of falling to I'm right because God exists kind of thing. So let me just thank you for kind of bringing with you such a interesting and fun discussion.
Thanks a lot.
That was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'm happy another time if we want to talk about the actual existence of God question, then we can do that separately. That's a
I
whole
would gladly invite you to that conversation.
nice.
Yeah,
So-
I look
Count me in
forward to
on
that
very happy to
conversation,
do that.
sir.
All right.
I play nice most of the time.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So this thanks a lot to everyone, and of course I know there's kind of a hot discussion in the live chats. I haven't really been paying attention to it, and Blarg, it seemed like you were trying to perhaps challenge the belief of was it FIDEX science? I don't know who that is, but
Yeah, it's just a discussion about the about what knowledge means. The standard justified true belief, and you go, well, that is the standard definition, but it's not really a useful definition because that's not what people really think of when they talk about what they know.
Another topic then. There's quite a few things that we can talk about, but if you are interested, FIDEX science, you can put in the comments, or if you're on Twitter, you can drop me a DM or whatever. This is my handle for. I'm not on Blue Sky very much, but I am generally on Twitter, and I'll get DMs. So you can contact me that way if you're interested. And just to close it off, thanks everyone on the panel and everyone in the chats. And I wish every one of you a happy weekend.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.